Hello and welcome to this After Maths episode of the Primary Maths Podcast, the show where we talk all things primary maths. With me, John Cripwell.
And with me, Becky Brown.
Hello again, Becky. It is nearly half term for most people.
It is. It's always a busy half term, this one, isn't it? So I expect lots of listeners are really looking forward to being either nearly or by now being at the end.
Yes. Yeah. I'm pretty sure nearly everybody is off next week because it's bank holiday, obviously, on Monday. And then I'm pretty sure everybody's... I know lots of areas have different half terms and things, but I think it's fairly uniform next week. So yes, congratulations. You have made it to half term. Yeah, I always... As much as it was lovely that the weather was getting nicer and SATs were out the way when I was teaching in Year 6, I used to find the summer term slightly stressful, I have to say, as a school leader and also as a Year 6 teacher, because there was just so much going on. And try to remember day to day what was happening. I always used to find slightly stressful.
Yeah, it's a very busy time, is it? Particularly for Year 6, I think, because yes, all of the SATs are out of the way, but you've got productions and assemblies and performances and stews and all things like that. And
sports events, lots of sports events happening, which is brilliant. Yeah. But kids out for transition. Some people are going out to football today, and some people are going out to gymnastics today, and they're here, there, and everywhere, and things, and risk assessments for all those stuff. Transition days, secondary schools coming in. We used to have about half our pupils at the last school that I worked at. I was there 12 years. About half our pupils went to a county secondary school, and they had all the pupils did one transition day there, but over 2 days. So they either went on, say, the Monday or the Tuesday.
Yeah.
And then the city schools, where the other half of the pupils went, they had 3 transition days. As in, they went for all 3 of them, and all at the same time, the same across the city. But they were never at the same time as each other. So again, you only had kind of half your class there at any one time, or so it was just it felt like there was a lot of juggling going on. And as you say, then trying to do performances and I don't know, lots of things that just seem to get saved up for the summer term for some reason.
Yeah, and then it's always weird, isn't it? Because as soon as you sort of find out, I've worked in small and big schools, but most recently a bigger school. As soon as you find out where you are heading for the next academic, you've almost got one foot there as well, haven't you? Thinking about what you need to do and if you're changing classrooms and
that's the thing, isn't it? People will be waiting to find out now, won't they? Because it's almost the deadline for giving in your notice, isn't it? So that was always a bit of a tricky thing as well. Some people felt that they wanted to know where they were next year to decide whether they wanted to stay or not. I mean, not at my school, obviously. Everybody wanted to stay at my school because it was so lovely. But I know some teachers do feel like, if I'm going to be moved to Year 6 next year, I'm going to look for a different job instead. But you can't tell people where they're going to be really as a school leader very easily until you know who you've got for next year. So it's chicken and egg time, isn't it? It's one of those peculiar things about teaching that your job can look quite different year to year. While still ostensibly doing the same job.
Yeah, although for teachers in a primary school, of course, we know that the job you do in Year R, for example, is totally different to the job you're doing in Year 6.
That's what I mean, yeah. You could be employed to do the same job, but it looks completely different depending on which year group you're in. And obviously everybody has their preferences, don't they? As I've said many times, I was much more comfortable in upper Key Stage 2 than I was either in Key Stage 1. I never worked in FS, although I did come to love it in the last few years of teaching and still do. But if you'd have told me that I was going to be in reception for a year, that I would have found that quite stressful, I think, thinking ahead, because there's so much I don't know. It's quite a specialised role, I think. And and this, it's such an important job, but it's also, that first time that children are coming into school for a lot of them, unless they've been in school nursery, that first time they're coming into school and you're having to, yeah, everything builds from there,
Yeah.
doesn't it? So it's, yeah, not a skill set that I have, I don't think. Although, if somebody had moved me there, then I'd have given it a go, I'd like to think.
Yeah, me too. I'd never gone down that far, and I was a bit frightened of it, I suppose. Although less so since having my own children and
Yes.
just seeing the importance and the sort of holistic approach. I love that. But yeah, it's interesting to think that actually someone's decision which year group they're going to put you in could actually have changed the direction that you've gone in for whatever reason. But
Totally, yeah,
yeah,
totally. So yes, those conversations will be happening at the moment, and from a leadership point of view as well, that it's equally difficult and stressful because you're aware that I think most head teachers and SLT teams, they genuinely want to try and keep staff happy because it's hard to get a good staff together, and you don't want to necessarily upset people for no reason and things. And people have definitely, as we've just said, got their preferences over where they want to be. But equally, you've got to have teachers in every classroom in the school.
yeah,
Somebody's got to teach in year 4, somebody's got to teach in year 2.
yeah,
So, if everybody puts down that they want to be in year 6 next year, that was never going to happen. But if everybody put down that they wanted to be in year 6 next year, some people are going to be missing out, aren't they?
yeah,
Unfortunately. And then you've got that whole thing about, you're being moved for your professional development or for your experience, yeah, for your CV, which again, I can see to an extent, but only if that's what you want to do. I think you should have some input into your own professional development, maybe, or whether you actually want to have a career that requires you to have taught from EYFS to year 6. Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. Hopefully, good leadership teams will be having conversations with people rather than just
yeah, yeah,
directing them. Maybe.
yeah. Hopefully that happens in most cases. But
What
we
was
don't
the
have it, John, because we are going to be back here next week and the week after, and who knows, the week
Yes.
after
Yeah.
doing
Hopefully nobody moves us onto, the science team or the computing team or something.
Yeah, I
That
don't think
that
that
would
would be
be,
very
yeah,
interesting to listen to.
that'd be out of my comfort zone. But yeah. What was the biggest jump you ever made, Becky, from one year group to another?
3 to 6,
Hmm.
and possibly back the other way. Yeah, I might have gone back the other
The
way as well at
following
one
week.
point. Yeah, yes, ran away.
Well,
Um,
who did this? Who made this error? Who put Becky in year 6? Come on. I'm sure that wasn't the case.
I think there I don't know, I feel like there's a little bit of a strange belief in schools that actually you work your way up to year 6 with years of experience. I think it's because experience is helpful in year 6. It's a different way of doing things. Of course, you would like to have people in there who've done it before, but how do you know if you don't try somebody out in there that they're not
Absolutely. Yeah.
amazing at it? So I think I jumped around all over the place, but the biggest jump was definitely, I think, no more than 3 year groups. How about you, John?
Well, I was in year 6 in my second year. So in my first year of teaching, I had a year 5 class and I followed those into year 6. So yeah, that kind of years of experience thing went out the window. Was I the best year 6 teacher? Definitely not. No. And credit to my head teacher for having the faith, possibly misplaced faith in me to put me in there. And as you say, I think it is a misconception that year 6 is any more important than any other year group.
Yeah.
However, having said that, we do know that the data that comes out of year 6, which is accumulation of that child's journey through school, does have a huge impact on the school and potentially
Yeah.
particularly on the head teacher, doesn't it? So you can understand a little bit why they might want what they might consider to be a safe pair of hands, I suppose,
Yeah.
in year
And
6.
and the subject knowledge is huge, isn't it? You do have to have a really broad and fairly deep subject knowledge by the time you get to year 6. Not that you don't earlier on,
I was
but
going to
there's
say, I think you do. Yeah, it's that tension between pedagogical knowledge and subject knowledge, isn't it? So,
yeah.
but even if I think about again, let's take year one maths this time, the knowledge that you have to have about how the number system works in order to be able to teach that in the best possible way is different from the knowledge that you need in year six. I'm not saying that one is particularly more complex than the other.
Well, and that year one knowledge is super important, isn't it? Because that is the knowledge on which future knowledge is based. So
yeah, if you get it wrong at that point, I mean, this was a conversation that I was having with somebody on LinkedIn. Feel free to find me on LinkedIn and add me on there, follow me on there, John Cripwell. We were talking about why so many pupils leave secondary school without a good GCSE in maths. And it was SATs week, and the sort of trail went back to SATs and how many pupils failed. Fail is such a loaded word, but don't leave primary school at the expected standard. And when you look at it, the percentage is huge, really, when you think about it. I've not got the stats for last year. In fact, let me just have a look, Becky, unless you happen to know them off the top of your head. The Key Stage 2 SATs in maths 2025, it would have been, wouldn't it?
Yep.
So last year, let's just have a look. So just off the top of my head, Becky, and not because I've just Googled it, 74% of pupils last year achieved the age-related expectations. Now, we know in order to get those, you definitely don't have to have answered every question correctly on the tests. And we also know that the tests are not year 6 content particularly, they're Key Stage 2 content. So when we're thinking about the numbers of pupils who actually answered, well, we know 26% didn't meet the standard, and I would imagine the numbers of pupils that got at the lower end of that scaled score would have been quite high as well. And yet, that, as we've said before, a lot of that content is year 4 and 5 content, some year 3 content in there as well. I was talking to National Numeracy this week on the interview episode. I was joined by Julia and Paul from National Numeracy to talk about confidence in maths and where this comes from and how we can develop it in adults and how important it is to get it right in children. The idea that we're giving children tests at the end of year 6 where a good proportion of them are not going to be able to answer those questions doesn't feel like a good way to build confidence, I would suggest, or make them feel like mathematicians. And yet, getting back to the point where we started this, I would suggest that unless you get it right in Key Stage 1, they're not going to be able to answer those questions at the end of Key Stage 2 because you're going to have gaps open, and we know the curriculum is so full that it's hard to spend time closing those gaps. And even if you do close those gaps, because you've spent time closing those gaps, you've not taught something else, and you can't build on prior knowledge unless you've closed those gaps. So it all comes down to getting it right in early years, first of all, and then getting it right in Key Stage 1 so that when they start Key Stage 2, that they've really mastered the number system and the additive relationships between numbers in that system so that they're ready to think about the multiplicative relationships that we deal with in Key Stage 2. And if we've got children coming up into year 3 that haven't got that, they're not going to be successful. So my point being, it's really important that you've got great teachers in year 1 and EYFS and year 2. But it's really hard, isn't it, as a school leader?
Yeah.
It would be lovely to think that every teacher is absolutely brilliant and on their A game every day. But again, we're working with people, and people have got things happening in their lives and things happening. It's not likely, is it, that's necessarily going to be the case?
No, it's such a hard balance, isn't it, between getting the right people in the right place, but also, also having that whole school. And of course, then you've got new staff coming in who have come from different approaches and old staff leaving. Yeah, I never went into the world of leadership, John, and I'm having this conversation. I'm fairly glad that I didn't.
It's definitely tricky. And I used to enjoy those conversations and trying to work out people's strengths and try and play to them and things. But as we said before, you've got X number of classes, X number of teachers. You've got to work systematically, Becky, in order to. You'll see what I've done there in a moment. In order to put people in the best possible place for them and the best possible place for the pupils that they are teaching. Anyway, we are nearly 16 minutes into this podcast. Recording anyway. There might be a slight bit of editing that happened where I was Googling things. But we haven't actually talked about what we were going to talk about today, which is, Becky.
Well, if our listeners hopefully are already aware of our new problem-solving collection that we've been working and developing on for a very long time now, but has just come to the Twinkle website fairly recently. And so maybe 4 weeks ago, we mentioned that our first unit on pattern spotting had gone live, and we have just had the second unit on working systematically. So we've been talking a lot, and we are going to continue talking a lot this week around working systematically, Jon. When I say working systematically, what do you think? What do you think of?
Well, the first thing that springs to mind is an old SATs question, actually, about colours of printing on a T-shirt. It was something like Chen goes to get a T-shirt printed, and he can have this combination of colours. How many different, possible combinations of colours could he have on the T-shirt? It was something like that.
Yeah.
And I always remember that you had the question took up probably a third of the page on this A4 test, and then the rest of the page was blank. And I was thinking, there's your clue. They've given you loads of space here to write down all the combinations of colours and to work systematically. But it's funny. I don't know where, I could be wrong here, but I having looked at a lot of schemes and a lot of things over the years, I don't recall many particular lessons on how to work systematically. It felt very much like a sort of soft skill that we're just expected to use when it was appropriate. And actually the focus of the lesson is on multiplication, or the focus of the lesson is on algebra, often when it came to working systematically. But the actual idea of working systematically, I don't know, Becky, it seemed to fall out of favour a little bit, maybe, or there was a feeling that actually you should just be able to think around the thing or reason about it, and not necessarily need to work in a systematic way until it came to something like algebra, where you were trying to work out a pattern, and then you had to work systematically. But at no point had we been told how to work systematically. So
Yeah.
I always found that a bit strange in year 6, having to try and teach that at that point. It seemed a bit late in the day for me.
Yeah, and I think we use the term that children should be working systematically, but if they haven't been taught what that even means to start with, it's quite difficult for them to apply that, isn't it, to any problems? And I think we see lots of problems like the one you suggested, where you're trying to find combinations and things, where that might be a more obvious sort of problem where you might work systematically. But I think the umbrella term of working systematically covers so much more than that. I think if we're going back, and we've talked about that really importance of getting it right at the beginning, just sorting very early on is working systematically. You're making a choice and you're sorting things. Then, of course, moving on to ordering, finding a suitable point in, how you might record something might be working systematically. We talked last week, didn't we, briefly about the work of jottings and how important it was that there was a place for that, but also there comes a point where you might have to be a bit more organized, and this might be it. So finding all possible solutions is part of it, but then there's of course the whole idea that you might want to be able to prove that you found all possible solutions, and the only way you can really do that is by working in some kind of systematic way. I think when you think about factor pairs is my favorite, because I've taught finding factor pairs lots, done it all, with lots of manipulatives and things, and then sort of thought about how can we be sure we found all the factor pairs, and starting with one and working systematically through. Children just seem to always just want to just randomly list them. That's a perfect example. It's not really a problem. It's just a task you might be asked to do. But there is a reason that working systematically is going to help.
So let's just, for people who might be less familiar with that part of the curriculum, a factor pair, a pair of numbers that, when multiplied together, make a given value. So, for instance, if we were looking at factors of 4, then we would start with 1 and 4, because 1 times 4 is 4, and then you'd have 2 and 2, which again gives 4, and then we've exhausted all the factor pairs of 4. But when the number becomes larger, you can have quite a few factor pairs, can't you? And it can be, you can easily forget one
Yeah.
relatively easily. Yeah.
And it's important for loads of things. Factor pairs come in all the time. When you're talking about area, for example, you might talk about length and width. Those are factor pairs. And you definitely need it later on in Key Stage 3 as well, when you're starting to think about lowest common multiple and highest common factor. So yeah, there is a place for working systematically, not just in problem solving, but in maths in general. But like anything in problem solving, it does need to be taught. We can't just assume that by just giving children more and more of the same. If we're doing that, we might teach them how to do that particular type of problem, because they'll learn because they're doing it over and over again. But they're not going to have the skills to apply that to something else.
Absolutely. I remember a while ago, and I think this is a conversation that's still ongoing, really, in terms of pedagogical approaches. But there was a whole thing about, do you teach problem solving, or do you teach through problem solving? And I think there's benefits of both, but I think it's very hard to teach through problem solving if you don't know how to solve a problem, if that makes sense. So I think there's definitely a case for, can I learn more about finding common factors or factor pairs? Can I find more about that? Can I learn more about that through solving a problem? Yes, you definitely can. But if accessing the problem is the barrier, then we can't learn much about factor pairs at that point, can we? So
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right, Becky. There needs to be some teaching of how to solve the problem, and not just a specific problem, but, skills for problem solving. And then that will help us to access, what I want to learn about factor pairs in this case.
Yeah. And you're building a toolkit, aren't you? I mean, I do some tutoring in Key Stage 3, and sometimes, we come across GCSE questions, and it might be a topic that hasn't been taught. But because the toolkit of maths knowledge and maths skills is so robust, it doesn't matter, because actually you can apply your knowledge. You can't always do that. If you're starting a brand new concept, you probably need something in your toolkit first taught to you, but it's then having all of those things. And working systematically isn't going to be the only strategy you use to solve a problem. It's going to be working alongside other things as well. But it is one of those things we need in that toolkit, I think.
So we've been talking about Key Stage 1, which is neither of our specialist area particularly. But what might working systematically look like in Key Stage 1, Becky? What sort of things are we thinking about where we're talking about working systematically in Key Stage 1?
So early on in year 1, it's going to start with sorting. If you're wanting children, let's think about your T-shirt example. If you're wanting children to find some combinations, for example, they're going to need to be able to sort into the ones that look the same, because eventually working systematically is about finding a starting point and then changing one thing at a time to make sure you've got them all. Well, if you don't have a knowledge of what sorting looks like, you might find that difficult. So it could just be sorting in different ways, and
So
not just...
it could be here's some some different color counters. We want to make a bar chart of how many of each color there are. Before we can do that, we need to sort them into all the red ones, line them up, all the blue ones, line them up, and then we can compare them, can't we? And make almost a physical bar chart at that point. And that would be working systematically for year 1, for instance.
Yeah, and definitely more than that, because of course, what would be great if you had counters that were multicolored, but also multi-sizes. I'm thinking of they're called compare pairs. I'm sure others are available.
Yeah.
So not children not just sorting in the way that you want them to sort, but being able to say why they chose to sort it in this way, and maybe being able to try to convince somebody else that they should have sorted that way. Things like that.
Brilliant.
Lots of authority and things, physical things as well.
Okay.
And then of course, I guess you might move into becoming a little bit more ordered. So you might think, well, we're not just sorting, but we might now order these. So you might have 3 cubes, counters, whatever, and you might put them in a particular order and say, well, that's one, that's another. Okay, well, which order are we going to put them in? Which makes sense? Does it make sense to put the ones together that have the red counter first. Lots of, and I would say manipulatives here are fabulous because that you can move things around without, you haven't made a mark on anything, but you can move them around and sort of discuss those choices. So I think you're moving on to ordering then, but then you're automatically starting to think, where am I going to start? Which is key for later on for working systematically in Key Stage 2 as well.
But some of these things will happen organically, won't they, in a lesson? I'm just thinking about, that if we're making groups in year one, then we will be trying to, I mean, you would hope, although I've seen this lots of times and children do not always work systematically when they're doing that. There could be a worksheet with 10 counters on it and it says put them into groups of 3 or whatever. I mean, that's not a great example for year one, is it? But let's say 12 counters, put them into groups of 3 that draw around a group. And some of the children like to draw around ones that seem to be quite far away from each other just to make interesting patterns and things. So it doesn't necessarily happen organically, does it? For some children, it will. And for some children, it won't. And so I suppose it's, as a teacher, it's spotting that opportunity and making the most of it, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think efficiency really comes into it. I mean, if you can, you have to prove to children why they have to do it. Why would they? Why would they choose the ones close to each other? But if you can show them, well, this is what so and so did, or this is what you could do, and compare those approaches to see which is maybe most efficient, or maybe quickest sometimes, or maybe most fluent. But comparing that oracy and that talk about choices is really, really important there, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely. So that's working systematically in Key Stage 1. And I guess moving on from there, it's beginning to record them, or what would be the next kind of steps?
So moving on from sort of being able to say, well, this is what I'm going to start with. I mean, if we imagined, say you had sort of different colored torches flashing and you had 3 flashes and you had 4 colors, say, for example, I'm using combinations because that's the easiest way to describe it. But you might think, where am I going to start? Okay, I'm going to start with a red torch. And then, well, let's find the others that start with red. Maybe we'll just change the 3rd color first, or maybe we'll just change the 2nd color first. And some children might spend a very long time finding all the combinations. But the only real way you're going to be able to prove that you found them all is to put them in a systematic list. Now, it could be that's part of the learning, that they just start by finding them, and then you can organize them and talk about the organization. And hopefully that will also then prompt them to start spotting patterns once they've got all of the patterns starting with a red and they've worked out that there's maybe 6 of those. If they find 6 for green, they might then think, oh, actually, okay, I've spotted something here. I don't need to do the ones for yellow and blue because it's going to be 6 again. And this is why, because I've got my systematic ordering. So I think that sort of proving things and justifying will come in then. Eventually, of course, working to a bit more generalization, and algebra, which is one of our favorites, I know. It's a perfect place to start working systematically, because if you're finding unknowns, that might be what you need to do.
Well, again, it reminds me of another problem, which is actually about common multiples. So you might bring some factors into this, I suppose. A problem where you have 2 lights, one that flashes every 2 seconds and one that flashes every 3 seconds, and one that flashes 2 lights, let's say 3 lights, one that flashes every 2 seconds, one that flashes every 3 seconds, one that flashes every 7 seconds or something. And you need to work out when they will, what time will they all be on at the same time, and how many times would they all be on at the same time in an hour. Now, to begin to figure out how to do that, some children might just spot the idea of, oh, okay, I can use my find a common multiple of 2, 5, and 7, or whatever the numbers were that I gave. Some children, though, might need to begin to work systematically to write down those common multiples until they see, or write down those multiples of each one until they see a pattern that they can then begin to apply. So, yeah, it's just, as you were saying earlier, it's a tool, isn't it? And I feel like it's a tool that's slightly fallen out of favour in the last 10 years or so, but actually very much has a place in maths, and definitely beyond Key Stage 2 as well. There's certainly a place for working systematically through a problem. And it's a great way to develop that other quality that we talk about a lot in maths, which is resilience as well, isn't it? And, can I start working on something and not give up at the first hurdle, persevere with it and know that I'm working in a way that will help me to find a solution or a way through the problem eventually.
Yeah, and it's perfect for that low threshold, high ceiling approach because particularly if you're maybe using manipulatives, it's very visual. Everyone can make a start to finding possible solutions. But at the other end of the scale, you've got some children, certainly up end of Key Stage 2, who will start coming up with formulas. They might not know that's what they're called, but they will start generating those and having that discussion. So the possibilities, forgive the pun, are endless.
Absolutely. Yeah. You could just work through them systematically.
Yeah.
So if you would like to find out more about working systematically, very helpfully, Becky and I are recording a Teach Meet webinar. Actually, it will be recorded the day before this podcast goes out live. So we record this podcast on the Thursday. We're doing the webinar live this afternoon on the Thursday, but it will be up on the Twinkle Teach Me website probably in the next week or two, won't it, Becky? So if you want to have a look at that, please do so. You can access those completely free with a Twinkle membership. So go and or as part of your membership. So go and check that out. And if you're interested, our previous one on pattern spotting, I think is available on the website in the Teach Me area now. So go and have a look for that. Do you know what the next one is that we're going to be looking at, Becky? What's next in our suite of problem-solving skills?
Yeah, next month we are going to be looking specifically at using models. So looking at we might act things out or use specific manipulatives or visual models to support problem solving.
Amazing. As you know, that's one of my favourite things to talk about is representations in maths. So look out for that. If you don't have a Twinkle membership, you can access this training still for free when it goes out live. Or if you sign up and you can't make it to the actual recording, you'll get sent a link to watch the recording afterwards if you sign up before the event goes out. The event is recorded, I should say. So look out for that. That will be coming out next month. We'll try and give you a bit of prior notice before it does, so that as many people as possible can watch it totally for free. And if you're interested in any of the resources that go along with this, again, you can find those on the Twinkle website. We will put a link in the show notes to our problem solving page where you can find all the things that we have talked about in this episode. I think, Becky, that's a good place to leave it for this week.
Yep. Great. It's been lovely to have a chat, Jon.
Absolutely. For everybody who is off next week, enjoy it. We won't be here on Tuesday because we don't do interview episodes during half term, but we'll be back looking refreshed and ready for another episode next Friday with our Aftermaths episode. We will see you then.
Thanks for joining us. See you next time.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.